The tournament grounds buzzed with anticipation. Knights and warriors from across the 7 kingdoms had gathered to prove their worth before the immortal Queen Talia. I adjusted my leather armor, tightening the straps around my forearms. The weight of my father's sword hung heavy at my hip, a reminder of everything I stood to lose. Nervous, Ilara? Keston smirked, his golden armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. As the son of Duke Oren, he'd had the finest training gold could buy. I'd had only my father's lessons before the fever took him last winter. Save your breath for the arena, I replied, checking the edge of my blade. The crowds roared as Queen Talia took her seat in the royal box. Even from a distance, her presence was overwhelming. Tall and regal, with midnight hair that fell in waves down to her waist, she wore armor of deepest blue that seemed to shimmer with an inner light. Legends claim she had ruled for 3 centuries, never aging, never weakening. Some whispered she was blessed by the gods, others feared she had made darker bargains. My first 3 matches passed in a blur of clashing steel and tactical maneuvers. Years of hunting in the northern forests had made me quick, and what I lacked in formal training, I made up for in unpredictability. By sunset, I had secured my place among the final 8 competitors. The woodland girl has teeth, Keston muttered after I defeated a knight twice my size. I simply nodded, saving my energy for the trials ahead. That night, as other competitors celebrated, I retreated to the quiet of the training yard. The moon cast silver light across the packed earth as I moved through my father's forms, each stance flowing into the next. Your footwork is impressive, but your guard drops when you pivot. I spun around, sword raised, to find Queen Talia herself standing at the edge of the yard. Without her ceremonial armor, she looked almost ordinary, though no less commanding. Your Majesty, I stammered, dropping to one knee. Rise, she said, stepping into the yard. Show me that sequence again. For an hour, she watched me train, occasionally offering corrections or demonstrations. Her movements held a fluid grace that seemed impossible to match. When she finally took up a practice sword to spar, I knew I was outmatched before the first exchange. She disarmed me in 3 moves. You have raw talent, she said, helping me to my feet. But talent alone won't save you tomorrow. The next day's semi-finals brought me face to face with Keston. He fought with textbook precision, but I remembered the Queen's advice about his predictable patterns. When he lunged for what should have been a finishing blow, I sidestepped and countered, sending him sprawling into the dust. The crowd fell silent, then erupted. A duke's son, defeated by a commoner. In the final round, I faced the Queen herself. Custom dictated that she participate in the championship match, though few ever scored more than a single point against her. Show me what you've learned, Ilara of the North, she called as we circled each other. For a brief, shining moment, I held my own. Then she moved with impossible speed, her strikes coming from angles I couldn't defend. When it ended, I was on my knees, breathing hard, a dozen minor cuts stinging across my arms. You lasted longer than anyone has in decades, she said, extending her hand. The crowd watched in shocked silence as she helped me stand. How would you like to last even longer next time? What do you mean, Your Majesty? Her smile held secrets older than the mountains. I'm offering to train you, Ilara. To make you stronger than you ever imagined possible. Behind her smile, I glimpsed something ancient and powerful, and wondered what I would become under her tutelage. The Queen's castle perched atop Mount Azuria like a crown upon the world itself. As our horses climbed the winding path, I struggled to comprehend how my life had changed in mere days. One moment I was fighting for coin in village tournaments, the next I was following the immortal Queen to her legendary fortress. Most never see beyond the throne room, said Captain Dorian, the Queen's stoic guard who'd been assigned as my escort. His weathered face betrayed little emotion, but his eyes held a warning. Her Majesty sees something in you. Don't disappoint her. The castle's interior was austere but beautiful, polished stone and ancient tapestries depicting battles long forgotten. Servants moved through the halls with practiced efficiency, barely glancing at the newcomer in their midst. Queen Talia had changed from her tournament finery into simpler attire, a fitted tunic and leggings that suggested she was no stranger to movement and combat. "Your chambers are adjacent to the eastern training yard," she said, leading me through a maze of corridors. "We begin at dawn." Dawn, as it turned out, meant the first hint of light on the horizon. I'd barely closed my eyes when a sharp knock startled me awake. "The queen waits for no one," said a young woman with copper hair and freckled skin. She introduced herself as Briar, my assigned attendant. Especially not her new project. The training yard was empty save for Queen Talia, who stood perfectly still in its center, eyes closed, breathing measured. Without opening her eyes, she spoke, "You're wondering why I chose you." "Yes, Your Majesty. Because potential without opportunity is a tragedy." She opened her eyes, fixing me with that ancient gaze. "And because I've lived too long to waste time on those who cannot grow." The first week nearly broke me. Before the sun reached its peak each day, my muscles screamed and my lungs burned. The queen was relentless, identifying and targeting every weakness in my technique. Again, she would command after disarming me for the 20th time. "Your body must learn what your mind cannot yet comprehend." Evenings brought different lessons. We sat in her private library surrounded by texts older than most kingdoms, studying strategy and history. Sometimes she spoke of battles she had personally witnessed centuries ago, her voice taking on a distant quality that reminded me of her true nature. "How is it possible?" I finally asked one night. "Your immortality." She studied me for a long moment before rolling up her sleeve. A faint blue symbol glowed beneath her skin, intricate patterns shifting like living script. "The eternal mark," she said. "Bound to my soul in a ritual performed when the world was younger. It grants life unending, but not without cost." "What cost?" Her smile held sadness. "That's a lesson for another time." As weeks turned to months, my body transformed. Muscles hardened, reflexes sharpened, and occasionally, when executing a perfect sequence of movements, I felt something stir within me, a power responding to the Queen's teachings. Not everyone welcomed my presence. Lord Varian, the Queen's advisor, watched our training sessions with thinly veiled contempt. "She collects strays every century or so," he told me during a formal dinner where I sat awkwardly among nobles. "The novelty usually wears off." Later that night, I found Queen Talia on the battlements, gazing at the stars. "Ignore Varian," she said without turning. "He fears what he cannot control." "And what am I, exactly?" I asked, joining her at the parapet. "Why invest so much in training me?" The Queen turned, moonlight illuminating her perfect features. For a moment, the ageless mask slipped, revealing something vulnerable beneath. "Immortality is a lonely path, Ilara. Those you care for wither and die while you remain unchanged." Her hand brushed mine, a touch so light I might have imagined it. "I need someone who can walk beside me, even if only for a while." That night, our sparring took on new intensity. Each clash of practice swords sent sparks flying in the torchlit yard. When she pinned me against the stone wall, our faces inches apart, something electric passed between us. "Your strength grows," she whispered, her breath warm against my cheek. "But true power comes from understanding what you're fighting for." As she released me and stepped back, I realized with sudden clarity that I would fight for her, not just because she was my queen, but because in her eyes I had found purpose. "Tomorrow," she said, "we begin the real training." The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through mist-shrouded mountains as I stood in the sacred grove behind the castle. Ancient trees formed a perfect circle around a pool of water so still it resembled polished glass. Queen Talia knelt at the water's edge, palms pressed against the smooth stones. "Magic flows through all things," she said without looking up. "Most never sense it. Some feel it occasionally. A rare few can harness it." She beckoned me forward. "You are among that rare few, Ilara. I've sensed it since our first meeting." "I've never performed magic," I protested, joining her by the pool. "Neither had I, before I received the eternal mark." She dipped her fingers into the water, causing ripples to spread across the surface. Where they touched the shore, tiny blue flowers bloomed instantly. The potential was always there, waiting to be awakened. My training evolved. Mornings were still dedicated to physical combat, but afternoons now focused on connecting with the energy that Talia insisted flowed through me. For weeks, I sat by the pool, trying to sense what she described, the subtle currents of power weaving through creation. "You're forcing it," she chided, circling me as I struggled in meditation. "Magic isn't commanded, it's invited." Frustration mounted within me. Each evening I collapsed exhausted into my bed, having made no progress. Meanwhile, whispers spread through the castle. Servants avoided my gaze. Noble visitors watched me with curiosity during court functions, as if expecting me to perform tricks for their amusement. "The Queen's pet project fails to impress," Lord Varian remarked loudly during a feast, his cronies snickering behind jeweled goblets. That night, I found myself back at the Grove, alone and angry. I stared at my reflection in the moonlit pool, wondering if I was truly special or merely another of Talia's passing diversions. Self-doubt is the enemy of potential. I turned to find Talia standing at the edge of the trees, her white gown luminous in the darkness. "I'm beginning to think you were mistaken about me," I admitted. She approached slowly, her bare feet silent on the moss-covered ground. "Show me your hand." When I extended it, she placed a small seed in my palm. "Close your eyes," she instructed, covering my hand with both of hers. "Feel the life within it, dormant but waiting. Just as your power waits." Her touch sent warmth cascading up my arm. I focused on the tiny seed, imagining roots and stems, leaves unfurling toward sunlight. Something stirred within me, a river of sensation running beneath my skin. "Don't fight it," Talia whispered, her lips close to my ear. "Let it flow through you." The dam broke. Energy coursed through my veins, pouring from my core into my fingertips. When I opened my eyes, the seed had sprouted into a small plant with delicate blue flowers, the same flowers that bloomed wherever Talia touched the earth. Her smile was radiant. "This is only the beginning." Progress came rapidly after that breakthrough. I learned to channel energy not just into creating life but into enhancing my combat abilities. My blade moved faster, struck harder. My body healed from injuries overnight. During sparring sessions, I occasionally matched Talia's superhuman speed. "Control is essential," she cautioned after I accidentally shattered a marble column during practice. "Power without discipline is merely destruction." As my abilities grew, so did the tension within the castle. Court factions formed, those who supported my training and those who viewed me as a threat to the established order. Lord Varian led the opposition, whispering that I had bewitched the Queen. "They fear change," Talia explained as we walked through the royal gardens. "I've ruled for centuries with no champion at my side. Your emergence disrupts their comfortable positions. Is that what I am to you? A champion?" She stopped beneath a flowering tree, petals drifting around us like snow. "You could be much more, if you choose to be." Her fingers traced the line of my jaw, and I felt that now familiar current between us intensify. When our lips met, magic sparked visibly in the air around us, illuminating the garden in soft blue light. Her immortal essence called to the power growing within me, recognizing something kindred. But our moment was interrupted by the urgent sound of warning bells. We broke apart as Captain Dorian rushed into the garden, his face grim. "Your Majesty, we've captured a spy from the kingdom of Morrigan. They're planning an attack, he reported, casting a suspicious glance at me. And they claim to have allies within your court. Talia's expression hardened as she looked from Dorian to me. It seems your true test has arrived sooner than I expected, Ilara. She clasped my hand, her mark glowing beneath her skin. Are you ready to stand as my champion? The power humming between us gave me my answer. I am yours to command, my queen. What neither of us knew was how deeply the conspiracy had already penetrated the castle walls, or how soon we would face betrayal from those we trusted most. A storm gathered over Mount Azuria, unnatural in its intensity. Lightning fractured the sky, illuminating the castle's towers in brief, harsh flashes. Queen Talia stood at the war table, her generals and advisors assembled around her as Captain Dorian delivered his report. Morrigan forces have been spotted crossing the northern border. Their advance is swift and organized, he said, moving markers across the map. Our scouts estimate 5,000 troops, including their elite Shadowblade division. Lord Varian leaned forward, his thin fingers tapping against the wooden table. And what of this supposed informant? What intelligence has he provided? The captain's gaze shifted uncomfortably. He claims traitors within our court have provided Morrigan with detailed maps of our mountain passes and defensive positions. Preposterous, Varian scoffed. This is clearly disinformation meant to sow discord. Talia remained silent, her eyes fixed on the map. I stood behind her right shoulder, watching the subtle tension in her posture, a tension invisible to anyone who hadn't spent months studying her every movement. Ilara, she said finally, what do you sense? All eyes turned to me. I closed my eyes, extending my awareness as she had taught me. The energy currents in the room swirled with conflicting emotions, fear, determination, and, from one corner, something darker. Deception, I said, opening my eyes and scanning the faces around the table. Someone here masks their true intentions. Lord Varian laughed dismissively. Now we base military strategy on the mystical feelings of your protégé? Perhaps we should consult village fortune-tellers next. Silence, Talia commanded, her voice carrying the weight of centuries. Prepare the castle defenses. Double the guard at all entrances. Dorian, I want patrols on every mountain path. She straightened, her armor glinting in the torchlight. This meeting is adjourned. As the council dispersed, she held me back with a touch. Trust no one, she whispered. Not even those who have served me for decades. Something has changed. That night, as I patrolled the eastern battlements, a servant girl approached with a message. The queen requested my presence in the sacred grove immediately. I hurried through the darkened corridors, a sense of urgency propelling me forward. The grove was empty when I arrived. Clouds obscured the moon, casting the ancient trees in deep shadow. As I approached the pool, movement caught my eye, a figure emerging from behind the largest oak. I knew you would come running at her command, said Lord Varian, stepping into a shaft of moonlight. Like an eager dog. Where is the queen? I demanded, my hand moving to my sword. Occupied with more pressing matters. His smile was cold as winter. While you've been playing at magic and seducing your way into her favor, I've been securing our kingdom's future. Understanding dawned with sickening clarity. You're the traitor. Traitor? He laughed. I've served Talia for 60 years, watching her squander her immortality on meaningless pursuits. Morrigan offers progress, a vision beyond maintaining the status quo for eternity. 4 armed men emerged from the trees, surrounding me. Not castle guards, but foreign soldiers bearing Morrigan's crimson insignia. King Aldrich particularly wishes to meet the Queen's new pet, Varian continued. He's most interested in how she's managed to transfer a portion of her power to you. I drew my sword as they advanced. The first attacker lunged forward, but months of training with Talia had transformed me. I moved with preternatural speed, deflecting his blade and countering with a strike that sent him sprawling. The second and third came together, forcing me back toward the pool. As I fought, the energy within me surged, responding to danger. Blue light emanated from my skin, startling my opponents. I seized the momentary advantage, disarming one and knocking another unconscious. Varian's eyes widened. Perhaps she has taught you more than I realized. The final soldier charged. I sidestepped and channeled power through my blade, slicing through his armor as if it were parchment. He fell without a sound. Alone now, Varian backed away. This changes nothing, he spat. The castle's eastern gate opens for Morrigan's main force at midnight. Even you cannot stop an army. Before I could reach him, he hurled a vial at the ground. Thick smoke erupted, and by the time it cleared, he had vanished. I raced back toward the castle, heart pounding. Alarm bells began to sound, followed by the distant clash of steel and shouts of battle. At the main courtyard, I found chaos, guards fighting against guards, confusion reigning as loyalties fractured. Captain Dorian appeared at my side, blood streaming from a gash across his forehead. The eastern wall has fallen, he gasped. They knew exactly where to strike. Where is the Queen? I demanded. Her chambers. Lord Varian led a contingent there directly. Panic seized me as I fought my way through the castle, cutting down Morrigan soldiers and traitorous guards alike. The power Talia had awakened in me flowed freely now, enhancing every slash and parry. Where my blade touched, blue fire followed. I reached the royal wing to find the doors to Talia's chambers splintered. Inside, furniture lay shattered, and the walls bore scorch marks from magical combat. At the center of the destruction knelt Queen Talia, blood staining her white gown, surrounded by fallen bodies, some Morrigan soldiers, others her own guards. Her eyes burned with ancient fury. They've taken it, she said as I rushed to her side. Varian has stolen the source of my power. In her trembling hand, she held a fragment of crystal, glowing faintly blue. This is all that remains of the Star of Eternity, the vessel that has sustained my immortality for centuries. I covered her hand with mine, our shared energy creating a momentary shield around us as distant explosions rocked the castle foundations. Without it, she whispered, I will begin to age. To die. Her vulnerability in that moment struck me more deeply than any blade. I raised her face to mine, our foreheads touching. Then we will take it back. Part 5, The Champion's Ascension. Dawn broke over a battlefield of smoke and ash. The castle's lower levels had fallen to Morrigan forces, while Queen Talia's loyal soldiers maintained a desperate defense of the upper chambers and northern towers. I stood at the Queen's side in her private sanctuary, watching her condition deteriorate as the hours passed. Without the Star of Eternity, the immortality that had sustained her for centuries was slipping away. Fine lines appeared at the corners of her eyes, her midnight hair now streaked with silver strands. The eternal mark on her arm pulsed weakly, its glow diminishing. Lord Varian will take the star to King Aldrich, she said, her voice hoarse from battle commands. The ritual to transfer its power requires the blood of its previous bearer. They will come for me. Captain Dorian entered with a handful of scouts, his armor dented and bloodied. Your Majesty, we've tracked Lord Varian's movements. He's heading for Raven's Pass with a contingent of Morrigan's elite guard. Raven's Pass? I questioned. Why not retreat to Morrigan directly? Talia's eyes met mine, understanding passing between us. The Temple of Ages lies beyond the pass. The only place with enough ancient power to complete the transfer ritual. A plan formed in my mind. How many soldiers can you spare, Captain? Precious few, he admitted. We're barely holding the upper battlements. I turned to Talia, determination hardening my resolve. I need no army. The power you've awakened in me, it's growing stronger. I can feel it. She studied me, concern evident in her gaze. The temple's energies are unpredictable. Even at my full strength, I treated it with caution. Do you trust me? I asked, taking her hands in mine. Her fingers intertwined with mine, the fading light of her mark responding to my touch. With everything I am. Within the hour, I rode from a hidden postern gate with only Briar, the copper-haired attendant, as my guide. She knew the mountain paths better than any scout, having grown up in the shadow of Azuria. The Queen has never looked at anyone the way she looks at you, Briar said as we navigated a treacherous ridge. Not in all my years of service. How long have you served her? I asked, surprised. She smiled mysteriously. Longer than I appear to have lived. The Queen's inner circle all bear fragments of her gift, enough to extend our lives, though not to grant true immortality. The revelation startled me. Then why did she choose me for greater power? Because you're different, Briar replied simply. You don't desire immortality, you desire her. We reached Raven's Pass by nightfall, the ancient temple visible as a silhouette against the starlit sky. Morrigan forces had established a perimeter, torches marking their positions around the sacred grounds. There are too many for a direct assault, Briar whispered as we observed from a hidden outcropping. I closed my eyes, sensing the energy patterns as Talia had taught me. The temple pulsed with ancient power, but something else flowed through the mountain itself, ley lines of energy that connected to the sacred grove where I'd first awakened my abilities. I won't be attacking directly, I said, unsheathing my sword. The Queen and I share a bond now. Her power flows through me, and mine through her. I pressed the blade into the earth and channeled my energy downward, seeking the invisible currents that webbed beneath the surface. Blue light spread from my hands, racing along the ground toward the temple in luminous veins. Shouts of alarm rose from the Morrigan soldiers as the earth trembled. Ancient trees bordering the temple grounds awakened, their branches sweeping down to entangle the perimeter guards. The distraction was enough. I moved with enhanced speed, Briar struggling to keep pace as we slipped through the chaos toward the temple entrance. Inside, the air hummed with arcane energy. At the central altar stood Lord Varian, the star of eternity hovering before him as he chanted in a forgotten tongue. King Aldrich of Morrigan, a broad-shouldered man with a crown of iron thorns, waited eagerly at his side. You arrive just in time to witness history, Varian called without turning. The birth of a new immortal king. The only thing born today will be your regret, I replied, stepping into the chamber. Energy crackled around my blade, responding to the temple's ancient power. Varian finally faced me, his eyes widening at the blue light emanating from my skin. Impossible. She couldn't have transferred this much power to you. She didn't transfer it, I said, advancing slowly. She awakened what was already mine. Guards moved to intercept me, but they were no match for my enhanced reflexes. I cut through them with fluid grace, each movement precisely as Talia had taught me. King Aldrich drew his own weapon, a massive axe inscribed with dark runes. Kill her, he bellowed at Varian. Complete the ritual now. Varian raised his hands, dark energy swirling around his fingers as he launched a barrage of shadowy projectiles. I deflected most with my sword, but one caught my shoulder, searing through armor and flesh. Pain blossomed, but with it came clarity, the sensation of Talia's presence growing stronger despite the distance between us. As I fought, I felt her strength merging with mine, her centuries of experience guiding my movements. The blue light surrounding me intensified, forming patterns that mirrored the eternal mark on her arm. Aldrich charged, his axe sweeping in a deadly arc. I rolled beneath the blow and countered, my sword slicing across his thigh. He staggered but recovered quickly, revealing the fighting prowess that had won him Morrigan's throne. The star responds only to those worthy of immortality, he growled, pressing his attack. Then it will never serve you, I replied, parrying his strikes. As we fought, Varian continued the ritual, the star pulsing brighter with each incantation. I knew I couldn't defeat both opponents simultaneously, I needed to reach the star itself. In a desperate gambit, I dropped my guard deliberately. Aldrich seized the opening, his axe slamming into my side. Pain exploded through me, but it created the moment I needed. As he pulled back for a killing blow, I lunged past him toward the altar. My fingers closed around the Star of Eternity just as Varian completed his chant. Power surged through the chamber, a blinding flash connecting me to the artifact. But instead of draining me as Varian had intended, the star responded to the echo of Talia's energy within me, amplifying our connection. Visions flooded my mind, centuries of memories and not my own, the weight of endless years, and the profound loneliness of immortality. I felt Talia's presence more strongly than ever, her essence flowing into me through our bond. When my vision cleared, I stood transformed. The wound in my side had healed, and the blue light of the eternal mark now shimmered beneath my skin, intertwining with patterns uniquely my own. No! Varian screamed, lunging forward. It was meant for the king. My hand shot out instinctively, and a wave of pure energy knocked him backward. King Aldrich charged again, but his axe shattered against the field of power surrounding me. The star has chosen, I said, my voice resonating with newfound authority. With Briar's help, I secured both Varian and Aldrich, using the temple's ancient bindings to neutralize their powers. By dawn, we were riding back toward Castle Azuria, the Star of Eternity secure against my chest. We found the castle reclaimed. Without their king's leadership and with news of Varian's capture spreading, the Morrigan forces had retreated in disarray. Queen Talia awaited in the sacred grove, looking frilier than I had ever seen her. "You succeeded," she whispered as I approached, her eyes fixed on the star in my hands. I knelt before her, offering the artifact. "It belongs with you." She placed her hands over mine, but did not take the star. "It has chosen a new bearer." I felt the connection form, our energies intertwining across the mountains. "I don't want immortality without you," I admitted, the depth of my feelings finally clear. Talia smiled, touching my cheek gently. "The star no longer offers merely immortality. It has evolved, as have you." She guided my hands, pressing the star between our palms. "It offers partnership." Light exploded between us as the star dissolved, its essence flowing into both our bodies. The eternal mark on Talia's arm brightened, while matching patterns appeared on mine. Youth returned to her features as our foreheads touched, our breath mingling in the sacred air. "What happens now?" I asked as the light subsided, leaving us holding each other in the center of the grove. "Something that has never happened in all my centuries," Talia replied, drawing me closer. "I will no longer walk eternity alone."